The Creator is either the worst good movie I've seen in 2023 or the best bad movie. It's like great software that's operating on janky hardware, or maybe that analogy should be the other way around. Either way, the plot, the setting, and even the emotional aspects of The Creator are all exceptional as far as modern movies go. It fails to rise above average, though, in large part due to the ham-fisted dialogue that's seemingly written in this movie to spell out the motivations of its otherwise hazy characters who are making their way through an even more enigmatic fictional world. The plot is engaging and fundamentally relatable. It's solid. I mean, you've got an action star guiding an innocent but gifted child through a dangerous situation. You've probably seen this movie like 10 times already. This one just happens to star John David Washington, who plays Joshua, a soldier on the anti-artificial intelligence side who gets recruited for a mission to steal the enemy's secret weapon. That weapon turns out to be Alfie, a robot child who shares a mysterious connection with Joshua. Throughout the course of the movie, the two bond as they overcome obstacles and learn the truth behind the war on AI together, ultimately forcing Joshua to have to make a world-altering decision. The relationship between Joshua and Alfie adds some much-needed heart to the story. In fact, their dynamic sets the stage for all of the deeper philosophical questions that this movie reflects on, like loss, the burden of grief, and the age-old question of what it really means to be alive. It's what really separates The Creator from being just your standard paint-by-numbers humans versus robots flick. So yeah, The Creator does have a lot going for it. Cool setting, solid plot, interesting major themes. The finer details though, the actual sci-fi concepts behind the world of The Creator and the robots that occupy it, unfortunately, not as strong.
There's nothing here!
The real shame of The Creator is that a lot of the best stuff in it seems to be lifted from far superior works of fiction. Don't get me wrong, there's a few intriguing original concepts in this movie, but most of them are only touched on momentarily, primarily used as plot devices, or get left vaguely defined only to never be revisited. And vagueness isn't a problem in and of itself. We certainly don't want every concept in sci-fi spoon-fed to us. Much like the supernatural, sci-fi is best left with a certain level of mystery surrounding it. It adds to the escapism of the story and gives you a unique sense of the situation at hand. At the same time, some of those rules for how things work do need to get fleshed out, because if you don't explain anything, at a certain point, everything starts to feel like made-up bullshit. And I know that might sound like harsh criticism, but really it's a compliment to the world that Gareth Edwards has created with The Creator. I just want to know more about how it works, man. The opening montage of the movie alone is pretty wild. So it shows us that The Creator takes place in the future and apparently some kind of alternate timeline where humans invented artificial intelligence in what looks like the 1960s. And like most movies about AI, it goes badly, leading to a war between man and machine. The Creator does something original, though, by turning that conflict into a human one of East versus West, with mankind's Western powers uniting to destroy AI and mankind's Eastern powers uniting to fight alongside AI in an attempt to save it. Now, we don't know why the East sided with artificial intelligence or even the extent of the global division. Like, is this just a few countries working with AI? Is it just one? Is this half of the world that we're talking about? But to be fair, we don't really need to. This isn't really that kind of movie after all. I mean, it would be nice to know just a little bit more about the worldwide civil war than just East versus West.
Why?
But the global conflict is really just the stage dressing for The Creator's story. It's a movie rife with nebulous concepts, though, many of which would benefit from just a little bit of context or some explanation. Take, for example, one of the more interesting ideas in The Creator, the temporary resurrection of the recently deceased, a process where a dead person's consciousness is downloaded into a robot drone body, temporarily bringing them back to life. The only thing the movie tells us for sure about this crazy process is that the window for resurrection gets shorter the longer that someone's dead. How long? Well, that's unclear. Is there a point at which someone's unable to be resurrected? Probably. Does it matter if it's a human-looking robot, or could you theoretically download someone into a high-tech refrigerator, too?
What are the rules? You know what I mean?
Is it only used in combat situations? Are soldiers trained for this scenario? Do they use this technology with murder victims? That doesn't seem like it would go so well. And even though the answers to these questions don't really matter, what does matter is the fact that this level of ambiguity is applied to nearly all of the creator's major world-building concepts. Human-to-robot resurrection is really really just the tip of this upside down iceberg.
Doesn't anyone notice this?
What even is the significance of Alfie being a child robot? Sure, it's hinted at in the movie that it was impossible to make robot children before Alfie, but we don't know why. Was it illegal? Just inconceivable? We don't even know if Alfie's growing up organically or if they have to replace her parts piece by piece as she ages. Can you imagine? Okay, Alfie, come here. Time to install your 13-year-old zit-ridden face.
What are the rules? You know what I mean? Like,
No, for the most part, Alfie being a robot child is mainly utilized as an additional challenge that her and Joshua have to overcome as they do their best not to get caught behind enemy lines by a variety of factions. I mean, I wouldn't know how worried to be for them anyway if they got caught. Sometimes the robots in the Creator come off as being about as intimidating as the battle droids in the Phantom Menace, but then in other moments, these robots are off-screen slaughtering highly trained Marines like a goddamn T-1000. And that's a problem for this movie, because we don't know how much of a threat the robot enemies pose to the protagonists at any given time. In some scenes, robots are easily overpowering people, beating the shit out of them, and then in other scenes, robots are getting choked out by people. Let me repeat that. A robot gets choked out in this movie. Do these robots need air? Is that just a special model of robot? What the hell was going on in that scene?
It's in the movie done.
To the creator's credit, the robot's inconsistency in combat could be a clever way to get the audience questioning if AI really is a threat to humanity. I mean, maybe they're not actually trying to kill the humans most of the time. Maybe it's all on purpose. Maybe? The creator makes it pretty clear who you're supposed to be rooting for, though. I mean, the AI are kind of just minding their own business, living side by side with Eastern humans, while the Western powers act as this occupying force, causing mass destruction via their war satellite N.O.M.A.D. Oddly enough, though, the space-based genocide machine never musters the intimidation factor that it deserves in this movie. N.O.M.A.D should feel like an oppressive god who's ready to smite anything that stands in defiance of it. Instead, it comes across like an overweight cop who's constantly struggling to keep up with the perps, only to finally arrive on the scene to indiscriminately empty clip after clip at everything in sight. Why does N.O.M.A.D have a target lock-on system that highlights each individual robot before they're attacked? Doesn't that just let the robots know in advance when they're about to get blown up? You know, because they're highlighted? Why the fuck would that be a feature? Maybe it's supposed to be something that only the robots can see, like some kind of visual representation of them detecting the electromagnetic signal that N.O.M.A.D uses to lock onto them in the first place, or it could be to try and mitigate human casualties. But if that were the case, why doesn't N.O.M.A.D just use some kind of magnetic-based weapon against the AI in the first place? You know, something that would harm the robots with minimal human casualties. No, instead, they elect to just blow everything up.
Why?
Like the resurrection technology, N.O.M.A.D is an interesting idea. It just doesn't come across as being practical, like, at all. It doesn't seem like a good idea to have your whole war against the AI threat hinge on a linchpin battle station. Couldn't they have just built like 100 smaller N.O.M.A.Ds that patrol the planet instead of one huge one? What, have they never seen Star Wars in this alternate reality? And while some concepts are better left in the dark, like, for example, whether the individual robots in the Creator die when their bodies are destroyed, or if they live forever as a part of some kind of collective AI consciousness. Basically, do they have a soul? The ideas that serve as your world-building pillars, though, they need a little bit of logic behind them to help hold up the fictional reality that the story takes place in. Sometimes you just want to know how much damage the robot can take before it's going to break, and there are a lot of robots that break in this movie, and to make matters worse, some of those robots are given comically Looney Tunes-style deaths.
It's in the movie done.
One robot gets a literal hole blown through them that the characters then peer through like a tunnel. They do the whole, it's about to explode, no it's not, yes it is going to explode, bomb fake out bit from old school cartoons, and at one point a robot is blown up, resulting in her human significant other holding her arm as he mourns the now lifeless sex doll that he'd fallen in love with.
Right.
Come on, man. We see what you're going for here, the whole love knows no bounds thing, and I do believe that love is love, but that was a reach. And it's too bad, too, because the sex doll character was actually one of my favorite characters in the whole movie. She's one of the few that had a personality. As far as our leads go, Alfie is adorable, but she doesn't do much besides the prayer remote, and Joshua is a plank of wood. He doesn't have the dramatic chops of a Tom Cruise or the charisma of a Will Smith, and this movie kinda needed him to do both. The biggest letdown as far as characters go is the team of Marines that Joshua goes behind enemy lines with. You had the gung-ho guy with a wife at home who's obviously going to die, but besides that, I couldn't really tell you anything about any of them. There was that chick who stood guard at the start of the mission, and their leader, General Grandmom. That's pretty much it. And that's a pretty big missed opportunity since the characters that comprise your Special Forces team are essential to a Behind Enemy Lines movie, which the creator very much is. Each team member should have a unique specialty that's useful to the group and a distinct personality that differentiates them all from one another.
You blew it!
This group doesn't have a single personality between them, though, so you don't really care when they start getting picked off, which happens pretty much immediately at the start of the Alfie mission, instead of, having them get killed off one at a time throughout the course of the movie, giving the audience an opportunity to get remotely invested in these characters, or to even start to like them a little bit. I'll give Allison Janney this much credit. She might be a walking cartoon with her portrayal of General Grandmom, but at least as a character, she's a hard ass. She's cold, calculating, and relentlessly driven on her mission to eliminate the perceived AI threat to humanity. I understand her motivations, who she is, and her role in the story. That's more than I can say for most of the other characters, the majority of which are either ill-defined or so generic that they fail to stick out in any memorable way. Whether they're playing a human or a robot, they're all equally forgettable. Even the best characters in this movie, though, are stifled by the less than stellar dialogue. Bad dialogue can be overlooked, though, when a story is compelling or at least so much fun that you simply don't care. What's harder to overlook is Gareth Edwards' inability to properly build stakes in the third acts of his movies. And he's done it again here. So for the third act of the creator, Joshua and Alfie infiltrate N.O.M.A.D, and Alfie manages to shut down the entire space station, triggering its self-destruct protocol, delivering the Death Star blow to the literal big bad of the movie. And soon after, as Joshua and Alfie are making their way to the escape pods, they're attacked by a giant squid-like robot security thing. Big deal though, right? I mean, we just watched Alfie shut down a whole fucking space station, and sure, the squid robot thing might be a legitimate threat, especially if, say, Alfie was exhausted after shutting N.O.M.A.D down, leaving Joshua on his own to deal with the threat somehow, thus raising the stakes at hand since Alfie's been incapacitated. That's not what happens in this movie though. Instead, shortly after they're ambushed by the robot squid thing, Alfie does another prayer remote and shuts it down, so it's fine after like 30 seconds attention, like we figured it would be, because Alfie's already proven she can literally shut the entire space station off with her mind. What's one robot security squid monster compared to all of N.O.M.A.D?
What are the rules? You know what I mean?
And while I admit that when considered individually, these criticisms aren't so bad in and of themselves, shallow sci-fi concepts, the lackluster characters uttering drab dialogue, and the lack of stakes or mismanagement of those stakes, together they lower the quality of what should otherwise be an ambitious sci-fi film. It's what makes The Creator such a frustrating movie. It sails on the winds of great sci-fi that preceded it while attempting to introduce mind-bending concepts of its own to the genre, but unlike those classic sci-fi movies that inspired The Creator or the newer sci-fi movies that are continuing to push the boundaries of imagination, this movie's original ideas are nothing but illusions that fade the moment you approach them with simple intellectual curiosity. As much as I wish The Creator was a clever new entry in sci-fi, it's not. It's derivative. Don't get me wrong, I actually kind of like this movie. There's some good stuff in it. A fascinating setting, meaningful themes, an entertaining plot, but it's burdened with an overabundance of bland characters, writing that's as clunky as some of the robots featured in it, and inconsistent stakes that consistently undermine the sense of danger in key moments. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, especially if you're just looking for something to satisfy a sci-fi craving. Chances are you're not going to remember it a week later either, though, so that's why I recommend just checking it out for free whenever it's available to you. It's average and flawed, but at least it's not another reboot, sequel, or product-based movie that the studios seem to be churning out like chicken nuggets these days.